Shalom Elakim, Yisrael, Yehonathan Dawid with you here, Y4K, Yahweh for Christians, on what would have been Resurrection Day. We have 3 completed candles. Now we're on the 4th one. Yahweh Shua resurrected after the 3rd day. I'm going to give a scripture today that references that. So this is actually the day we should be most happy, because on our Redeemer, he paid it all, he gave it all, burnt sacrifice, and he rose. Then he offered himself as the heave offering and the wave offering. Okay? 4 times, once to each north, south, east, and west for the heave, eternal signal for the wave offering. Yahweh Shua paid it all. This is a Kodesh. This is a most happy time right now during this feast of unleavened bread. So this is part 5 total. It's part 4 of Unleavened, part 5 for the Pesach series. And we're going to, today's lesson is entitled The Refreshed Moon. Now, yesterday, we referenced Deuteronomy 19:15 to say that we need to have 2 witnesses to confirm anything. So we know that Pesach is the date that it is by 2 witnesses. And we know those 2 witnesses have to be heaven and earth, as Moshe said. In Job 38, verse 31, starting from verse 31, think up to 31 to 35, Yahweh said himself out of his mouth, he referenced the constellations. So Yahweh made the constellations. Yahweh did this as a heavenly sign to really mark the years. So it is not to worship, but we are supposed to also learn how to read the so-called stars, the Shemeshim, the stars, to let us know the year. Yahweh made the constellations for a purpose. Other people may do other sinful things with them, but that's their business. You use them for the purpose that Yahweh Shua said to use them. In John 5, verse 33 through 36, Yahweh Shua referenced Yochanan, the immerser, his cousin, as the earthly witness of himself. Yahweh Shua came from Hashemayim down to earth. Who witnessed of him was his cousin Yochanan. So that's the heavenly witness, which is greater than the earthly witness, but the earthly witness is important. I'm talking about this because we must have an earthly witness to signal when the beginning of the year is, the beginning of the covenant year. Abib 1 is the covenant year. Yahweh named the month after the plant Abib. So how are you going to ignore the whole reason for the name of the month? He named it Abib. That is the barley leaf of ear, green ear. How can you ignore that? You cannot have Pesach without the Abib. You're totally ignoring the foundation of the name and the starting point. Once we have that, then we have everything else right. We have all the other 6 feast days right. We'll get Unleavened correctly, the wave sheaf and all that, which 6 o'clock this morning, I had a service, a wave sheaf offering service. Yahweh Shua probably rose around 6 o'clock in the morning, as we call it, 6 o'clock in the morning. We know that, and we talked about yesterday, that the spring equinox, as they call it, only happens on 1 of 3 days, the 19th, 20th, or the 21st. So we should not be very far off from one another. We got Hebrews all across the world celebrating this date, this time. We should not be more than 3 days off from one another based on the spring equinox, following the stars that Yahweh himself spoke about in Job 38. Then we talked about how this is important. I know I don't have a whole lot of people following me. That's okay. This is a remnant ministry. I'm only serving the remnant. I'm not going to have thousands. I pray to have thousands, tens of thousands. But this, I do remnant radio. I have remnant literature that I write. And I'm doing a remnant presentation right here. And the remnant know that we're supposed to meet Yahweh at his appointed times. That is what we call the temple. That's what the original name Yahweh had for it. Ohel Moed, the appointed times. We're supposed to meet him at his appointed times. Leviticus 23, 10 through 14, Yahweh says that this is a perpetual statute, and wherever we live, in all our living places, it says, we are supposed to do this. So even though we're not going to see any green ears here where I'm living, we might see some, but it won't be from Yisrael. And Yisrael is the Kodesh land. That's the land that counts. But because Yahweh says in Leviticus 23, we're supposed to do this wherever we live. We're going to do it. And we also learn that in English, we have two words for the word Kodesh. Kodesh is the word for refreshing. We use that word to mean moon, and we use that same word sometimes to mean month. That is confusing. The foundation of this ministry, Yahweh for Christians, is original words gives you original truth. With the original words, you're going to get the original truth that the more proper word to use is refreshing. We understand that if you had an old automobile and you show somebody your old automobile, it's all worn out and used, then they come the next day and you buy a new automobile, it's two different automobiles. They're two different cars. It may be the same make and model, but it is a different vehicle because you bought a new one that's never been used before. So when we use the term new moon, we are out of order. New moon is not what it really is. It's a refreshed moon. The covenant is renewed every, what we call, month. So when we use the proper terms, we will get the proper understanding. And in using that, we would not be confused by trying to celebrate with a crescent. See, when you know that the moon is refreshed, it is a covenant is refreshed. It is the same one. So you have a car, an old beat up used car, and you used it up, and then you refurbish it, you refresh it. It's the same vehicle today than it was the day before you refreshed it. It's just been renewed, refreshed. It's the same automobile. The moon is the same every so-called month. It is not new. It is refreshed. That is the proper word. So that's what we learned yesterday, and I'm going to start focusing on using this word refresh and not new. Hosea 4:6 we know very well. So we're going to talk about Hosea 4:6, but also chapter 6, verses 2 and 3, and then we're going to seal the deal of what this refreshed moon is, what we call a new moon, with 1 Samuel chapter 20, okay? So let's begin. We're going to actually begin with Deuteronomy 17, verses 18 through 20. Deuteronomy 17, 18 through 20, and it reads as such. Also, it will be when he sits on the throne of his kingdom that he will write for himself a copy of this law in a book from the one before the priests, the Levites. And it will be with him, and he will read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear Yahweh, his mighty one, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the middle of Yisrael. This is what Yahweh is telling Moshe, that is the edict for kings. The king is commanded, Yahweh says, to literally with his own hand write down these 5 books. And as such, we are no longer a nation. We will be a nation when only Yahweh can make a nation, like he did when he came out of Mizraim. He made a nation in one day. He's going to make us a nation again in one day. In the future, we're going to be a nation again. In the meantime, you are the king of your household. You are the priest of your household. If you're a single mother and you have no man and you have a household or children, you are the king of the household. You need to write this down. If you are married, then your husband should be doing it. If you are the husband, you should be doing this. You're the priest of the home. If you are a pastor of a flock, you are commanded, not what Yehonathan is saying, what the word is saying right here in Deuteronomy 17, verses 18 through 20, to write down these 5 books. And I'm in the process of doing it now. And you're also commanded to read this thing daily. We are supposed to read this to keep humble, to be humble, to keep humble, and to direct and teach and lead in a Sadiq manner. That is what the book says. Read it, write it, obey. In Numbers 15, 30, 31, it says that there is no sacrifice for presumptuous sins. We are in the process of going through the book of Leviticus and the Torah portions, and it speaks of all of these sacrifices that there are. But none of them are made for you presumptuously sinning. So we do a presumptuous sin, we don't have a sacrifice. What Yahweh calls for is teshuvah. And that's what, is famous. The famous sin, one of probably the most famous sins in the Bible is Dawid with Bathsheba. We don't even understand that. I'm trying to teach the true meaning of that. But we do know that Dawid did not offer a sacrifice. He gave the calves of his lips. That's what his sacrifice, and he teshuvah, he turned, he changed his heart from there. That's what we're supposed to do. So let's do this. Let's do this. And let's worship Yahweh with fear and trembling. Let's go to, now talking about a very famous scripture that people reference very often. That is Hosea 4:6. People often, hardly a day goes by, if any day goes by, you don't see on social media where someone quotes Hosea 4:6, that our people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And that is true. We don't know the knowledge of our language, the knowledge of where we came from, the knowledge of our forefathers. We don't know the Torah. We have had all this whipped out of us in slavery. And that has destroyed us, and we have departed as a nation. But let's go further. Let's go to Hosea 6:3, the same prophet, and a lesser known scripture. In Hosea 6:3, it reads, "Let us know, let us pursue the knowledge of Yahweh. His going forth is established as the morning. He will come to us like the rain, like the latter rain and the former rain to the earth." So the book is saying we need to pursue the knowledge of Yahweh. You are supposed to literally actually be pursuing the knowledge of the Most High Yah. You love him, don't you? Don't you say you love him? Then seek after the knowledge of him. Seek to know him. Did you get married to somebody you just don't know? You just went on and met him and married him and just had one of those speed marriages? Didn't learn to know them? They didn't learn of you? Well, we ought to pursue the knowledge of Yahweh. That's what the book says. But you know what? If we did that, we will understand the previous verse. Here's a verse that is kind of obscure. Actually, it's very obscure, and we don't even know too much. Let's go to Hosea 6:2, the verse right before this. The verse that says, "Pursue the knowledge of Yahweh." Let's read this. It's very appropriate for this lesson today. Hosea 2:6 reads, "After 2 days he will revive us. On the 3rd day he will raise us up, that we may live in his sight." What does that mean? Has your preacher taught you this? What Hosea the prophet is saying is that Yahweh Shua, who is the first fruits, who resurrected on this day, 3 days into unleavened bread, he resurrected. He is the first fruits of the resurrection. Yahweh received his burnt offering, his burnt sacrifice, as a sweet savor to his nostrils. Yahweh received it Now we are supposed to offer ourselves as a burnt sacrifice, living the life that Yahweh Shua lived. Following his example, Yahweh Shua says in Hosea 6:2 that he will revive us after that third day. A day for Yahweh is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years as a day. We are currently in that third day from Yahweh Shua's sacrifice. We are now going into that 3,000th year, and adding to the previous 3,000 years, we're going to the 6,000th year, or the 6th day of this earth. After the 6th day, Yahweh Shua resurrects us before the millennial kingdom, at the time of the millennial kingdom. So, if we pursue the knowledge of Yahweh, we will understand. If we pursue the knowledge of Yahweh, as Hosea 6:3 says, we will then understand what Hosea 6:2 says. Doing that, we will not be a victim of what Hosea 4:6 says, which is being destroyed for lack of knowledge. Know your knowledge. Know that you are, look at the shirt. You're not colored. You're not black. You're not any of these other names that your slave master gave you. Yahweh said you are his people. He chose an Iberit people. He chose a Hebrew people. He didn't choose a black people. He certainly didn't choose any niggers. He didn't choose a colored people. Yahweh Shua chose a Hebrew people, a genetic nation. He is our Goel, which is a genetic term, means he's bringing those back to him that is his genetic family. The English word redeemer doesn't let you know that. The Hebrew word Goel tells you that. Tune in to Yahweh for Christians to get knowledge like that. Because here in this ministry, we use original words to get original truth. Now, what astronomers, now today's lesson is called the refreshed moon. A refreshed moon is zero luminous. That means it has no luminosity. You do not see it. So, how do we get this confusion? Well, that's because astronomers call the transition of they call it a conjunction. The transition from a conjunction to that first crescent on the right is only a few minutes. But the problem is, with the naked eye, and probably with even some devices, such as I have here, even this device is not going to be able to see a first sighting of a what they call a crescent, okay? Not on the first day. Maybe the second day, definitely by the third day. But by that time, it's too late. The so-called month is already started. So you cannot start, you're already late. You're already behind. The groom has already come and gone. The door is locked, and once he locks it, no one can open it. So we must get this right, as I said yesterday. The so-called new moon is zero luminosity. We're going to have scripture to show that. Now, the ancient world, how is it that birds, bees, I was looking out my window here in my office, you see the trees flower when it's time to flower. Birds, bees, and squirrels, and everybody, all the nature obeys the new season. They know when it is, and they conduct their activities accordingly. Mankind is the only one, the only creature made after his image that ignores the signs of the times and does not recognize the signs of the times. But if we pursue the knowledge of Yahweh with all our heart, might, and soul, and love him, we will be able to discern the times. Ancient civilization did. They can accurately, without all the technology we have today, measure the new moon, the crescents, and all of that. The whole phases of the moon, they were accurate on. The whole movement of the stars, they were accurate on. That's how your cousins, the Ishmaelites, was able to pinpoint the birth of Yahweh Shua HaMashiach, because they were accurate in reading the stars. How could they have done it over 2,000 years ago and we can't do it today? It's because we don't have a relationship with Yahweh as we should. Let's use scripture to support what I said about the so-called new moon, which we're going to give it a more accurate name, the refreshed moon. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 20. Okay? 1 Samuel chapter 20. And we're going to read verses 5, 18, 27, and 34. 1 Samuel 20, verses 5, 18, 27, and 24. Read the whole chapter, but this is what we're going to do here. And it reads, And David said to Jehonathan, Indeed, tomorrow is the refreshed moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat. But let me go, that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. Here in verse 5, David says, tomorrow. That means you have a waning crescent, a crescent on the left side. Since there was a crescent on the left side, because we know the moon reads like the Torah, from right to left. So David says, tomorrow is a new moon. Let me go on the third day. The third day, that's when I will come out. That's important. Let's go to verse 18. And verse 18 reads, Then Jehonathan said to David, Tomorrow is the refreshed moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. So once again, they're saying tomorrow is the refreshed moon, what you're calling new moon. I want to help get that out of our mouths. Let's start using the term refreshed moon. Verse 27, and it reads, And it happened the next day, the second day of the month. So we know that whatever the moon looks like, this is the second day of it, that David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, Why has the son of Jesse not come to eat either yesterday or today? So David was not at the king's table for 2 days into the new moon, the new month. Let's go to verse 34. And verse 34 reads, So Jehonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, because he was grieved for David, because his father had treated him shamefully. So I think this clears it. I do have another scripture we're going to really go in tomorrow to even support this at the mouth of 2 witnesses. So we see here that David hid himself under a new moon because that was the best time to do it. Completely dark with no luminosity. We know that the refreshed moon was emphatically and mathematically calculated by these men, by the whole ancient world at that time. The sighting of the sliver meant that the new moon was already 3 days over, according to this scripture. The sighting of the sliver means that the new moon, which we call the new moon, the refreshed moon, was already 3 days over. So that means Yahweh rose on a waning crescent. Now, the feast began at the end of the conjunction, okay? This feast that he missed began at the end of the conjunction. That means the crescent was on the left side. It was a waning moon, and astronomers call it a crescent. They call it a conjunction. It was on a wane. The feast started after the waning crescent, okay? And lasted 2 days. 2 days, David missed 2 meals under zero luminosity. This was perfect for David to hide in the field, which is the same thing that Yahweh did when he's going to hide his coming for those who are not ready. There's going to be 2 days of total darkness before the next coming of Yahweh to meet Yehuda. He doesn't meet Ephraim till 2 weeks later. But his coming, and we talked about that last year, we're going to talk about that again. So anybody who's a little confused, but he's going to come to Yehuda first. He does not come to all of us at the same time. And he's going to come after 2 days of a refreshed moon. Trumpets is the only feast day that happens under a new moon. In Matthew 24:36, it says that no man knows the day or the hour, but you are supposed to know the time. We're not going to know that because even Yahweh Shua says he doesn't know. He's going to know when his Father sends him out. So we don't know the day or the hour, but we do know the time. We're supposed to be aware of this because if we're looking for crescent watching, we're already 3 days too late. So that basically concludes this lesson. For another witness of 1 Samuel 20, I want you to read 1 Samuel 20 and get this knowledge of when, study for yourself, follow after me, of what a refreshed moon, which you're calling a new moon, is. Now for homework, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. Psalm 81, verses 3 and 4. Psalm 81, verses 3 and 4 is going to support 1 Samuel 20, verses 5, 18, 27, 34. Now we're going to use original words to get the original truth of Psalms 81, 3 and 4. Because in here is going to be confusing reading it in King James English. But we're going to go ahead and clear this up. So, let's call this the 31st of March, the last day of March, 2021. That ends part 5 of this Pesach series. And until tomorrow, Yahweh be with you. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be on you.